Everything you have ever tasted in your entire life has been at least partly a lie. Not because the food was fake, but because taste itself is not a simple readout of reality. It is a story your brain constructs from a wild cocktail of signals, guesses, and shortcuts, and it gets things wrong more often than most people realize. Think about the last meal you truly enjoyed. The richness, the complexity, the way one flavor seemed to bloom into another. None of that was happening on your tongue. Most of it was happening inside your skull. Your tongue, as incredible as it is, can only detect 5 basic categories of taste: sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. 5. That is it. So how do you experience something as layered and nuanced as a perfectly aged cheese or a slow-cooked stew with dozens of distinct flavor notes? The answer is that flavor and taste are not the same thing, and understanding the difference will permanently change the way you think about eating. Flavor is a full-body, multisensory hallucination assembled by your brain in real time, and it draws from your nose, your eyes, your ears, the texture of food against your tongue, even the weight of the fork in your hand. Scientists who study this field, called sensory science or psychophysics, have spent decades unraveling just how bizarre and beautifully unreliable this system really is. So let us pull back the curtain and look at what is actually going on every single time you take a bite. Here's a fact that stops most people cold. Roughly 80 to 90% of what you perceive as flavor actually comes from your sense of smell, not your tongue. Scientists call this retronasal olfaction, and it is the process by which aroma compounds from food travel up the back of your throat and into your nasal cavity while you chew. It is completely different from sniffing something directly with your nose, and it happens without you even noticing. You can prove this to yourself in about 30 seconds. Pinch your nose shut, close your eyes, and eat a jelly bean. You will get sweetness, maybe a hint of texture, but the specific fruit flavor, the thing that makes a strawberry jelly bean taste like strawberry, will essentially vanish. Now release your nose and breathe out through it. The flavor floods back instantly. That sudden rush is retronasal olfaction switching on, and it is one of the most striking demonstrations of how disconnected taste and flavor really are. This is also why food tastes so flat and unexciting when you have a bad cold. Your nasal passages are blocked, your retronasal channel is compromised, and suddenly even your favorite meal seems dull and lifeless. Your tongue is doing its job perfectly. Your brain just does not have enough information to build a convincing flavor experience. The human nose, by the way, is extraordinarily capable. Researchers have estimated it can distinguish between at least 1 trillion different odor combinations. 1 trillion. Your tongue, with its 5 categories, is not even in the same conversation. Smell is doing the storytelling, taste is just providing the punctuation. Now here's where things get genuinely strange. Your brain does not just blend taste and smell to create flavor. It pulls in every other sense as well, and these outside signals can completely override what your tongue and nose are reporting. Take color. In one of the most famous experiments in food science, researchers at the University of Bordeaux gave experienced wine tasters a white wine that had been dyed red with a flavorless food coloring. The tasters, all trained professionals, described the wine using red wine vocabulary: cherry, raspberry, earthy tannins. They were tasting the color. When you serve people a strawberry mousse that is colored orange, they routinely describe the flavor as orange or peach. Change it to white and it tastes like vanilla. The food did not change. The flavor perception did, entirely because of visual information. Sound works the same way. The Oxford researcher Charles Spence ran an experiment where participants ate potato chips while hearing the sound of crunching, played back through headphones at different volumes. When the crunch was louder, people rated the chips as fresher and crispier, even though the chips themselves were identical. That crunch sound is so deeply wired into our expectation of freshness that amplifying it literally makes the food taste better. This is not a quirk or an accident. This is the brain doing exactly what it evolved to do, using every available signal to make the fastest, most efficient judgment about whether something is safe and worth eating. Unfortunately, in the modern world, those ancient shortcuts can be easily hijacked, which is something the food industry figured out a very long time ago. The food industry employs armies of food scientists, flavor chemists, and sensory researchers whose entire job is to understand your brain's shortcuts and use them to make products as compelling as possible, and they're extraordinarily good at it. One of the most powerful tools they use is something called the bliss point, a term coined by the market researcher Howard Moskowitz. The bliss point is the precise concentration of sugar, salt, or fat at which a product is maximally pleasurable, where you get the most reward without triggering feelings of being full or overwhelmed. Moskowitz pioneered the systematic testing of thousands of product variations to locate this sweet spot mathematically, and his methods transformed the processed food industry. Beyond the bliss point, manufacturers exploit a phenomenon called sensory-specific satiety. As you eat one flavor repeatedly, your enjoyment of it decreases, but your appetite for a different flavor remains high. This is why you can feel completely full after a large dinner and then somehow find room for dessert. The dessert is a new flavor signal, and your brain treats it as a separate experience. Processed snack foods often layer multiple distinct flavors together to prevent your brain from ever fully habituating to the taste, keeping you in a state of perpetual mild excitement that drives overconsumption. The crunch we mentioned in the last chapter also matters commercially. Food engineers spend enormous resources developing the exact texture profile for each product because they know the sound and feel of food in your mouth contributes directly to how much you enjoy it and how much you buy. Even the packaging color is engineered to prime your taste expectations before the food ever touches your lips. So what do you actually do with all of this? Well, once you understand that flavor is a construction, you gain a surprising amount of power over your own experience of food. Research shows that simply paying more attention to what you are eating, really focusing on the aroma, the texture, the sounds, the temperature, dramatically increases your enjoyment of even simple foods. This is not just motivational advice, it is neuroscience. When you engage more senses consciously, you give your brain more raw material to build a richer flavor experience. Eating while distracted, scrolling through your phone, watching television has been shown in multiple studies to reduce flavor perception and increase how much you eat because the brain's multisensory flavor construction is being starved of the attention it needs to work properly. There is also fascinating evidence that you can retrain your taste preferences over time. Bitter vegetables like broccoli and Brussels sprouts taste unpleasant to many people because of genetic sensitivity to certain bitter compounds, but repeated exposure really does reduce that aversion. Your brain literally updates its predictions about a food the more times it encounters it safely, a process rooted in the same neuroplasticity that governs all learning. And knowing about the bliss point and sensory-specific satiety means you can watch for those patterns in yourself and make more conscious choices about when you are genuinely hungry versus when your brain has simply been cleverly stimulated. Taste is not a window onto reality. It is a vivid, creative, and sometimes easily fooled interpretation of it, and now that you know how the trick works, you will never eat quite the same way again. If that blew your mind even a little, hit like, drop a comment with the weirdest food fact you know, and subscribe so you never miss the next deep dive.